Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Professor Subhash Kak joins me today in discussing about the Saraswati River and the Saraswati civilization that existed in India. Now, there has been some talk because of a conference that just concluded in Delhi University about this. Major General G.D. Bakshi wrote a book about Saraswati, and therefore there's a lot of interest about what happened to this river, when did it flow, when did it stop flowing, and also, there's been an attempt to try and decode the Harappan symbols, and so far no one has been able to decode these symbols. What were those symbols for, and so on and so forth. So there are some theories that have been put out, but to put it all together in perspective, let's reach out to Professor Subhash Kak. Subhash ji, welcome to PGurus channel.
Thank you, Sri Iyer ji.
So Subhashi, in your perspective, when do you think the Saraswati River stopped flowing, or before that, when was the civilization along the banks of Saraswati River established? And for viewers who have not seen the map of what could have been the path of Saraswati River, it is a river that was flowing right through, almost parallel to Indus, and most of it in current day terms probably flows through Rajasthan, and it drains into the run of Kutch. So that is the satellite imagery that says that this could have been the path of Saraswati River. So Subhashi, take it away.
Well, there are several theories. One prominent theory is that there was some tectonic event, namely an earthquake around 1900 BC, because all the settlements and towns on the banks of Saraswati River, and most of the settlements during 5000 or 8000 BC to 2000 BC were along the Saraswati River valleys. So they were apparently abandoned, or people moved away to the east and to the south around 1900 BC. This is an analysis of the archaeological data, and therefore it's been proposed that the river was going right to the sea until 1900 BC. There was a huge earthquake. Saraswati stopped receiving all the water that it was receiving before, because earlier on Satluj drained into it, so it had a lot of water. But there are other theories which say, well, Saraswati had already ceased to go to the sea in 3000 BC or prior. And the abandonment of the Saraswati civilization, which used to be called Harappan civilization, but now, since the oldest and largest town on it has been discovered on the bank of Saraswati in a place called Bhirana, therefore, there are a lot of people who are saying that it should be renamed Saraswati civilization. So, there have been there were all these settlements which continued, and then we do not see that it disappeared. In fact, after 1900 BC, there is another 500-600 years of relocated settlements, and some of them continued in Gujarat, for example. And after that, we have archaeological sites which can be correlated with Puranic accounts and other historical accounts. So Saraswati civilization did not die. It's a part of this continuing historical story of India, because there are events in the Mahabharata, in Ramayana, and certainly the Puranas, and you can also see a lot of the events mentioned in the canonical Vedic texts, because there are towns and kings and others who are mentioned in the Brahmanas, in the Aranyakas, which tell us that this is really a much older story, and there are astronomical events which go to, say, 3500 BC, which can be correlated with certain descriptions in the Vedic texts. And then there is another very important piece of evidence which has not always been highlighted, which is that the earliest Vedic text, such as the Rig Veda, is squarely in the Sapta Sindhu region. And it's only the later texts, such as the Mahabharata, where there is also mention of kings and places beyond the mountains, beyond the Himalayas, in regions called Uttar Kuru, for example, and Uttar Madhya. And these were the regions of Central Asia. So clearly there is a sequence which is inherent in the materials that we have in the text. And these materials seem to correlate very nicely with the archaeological record, because the archaeological record initially is based around Saraswati River, which in the Rig Veda, in the river hymn, is called Nadi Tama, the best of the rivers. Samudra, Giribhya Samudrat, which goes from the mountain to the sea. So if the Saraswati River dried around 3000 BC, as many archaeologists now believe, then certainly the Rig Veda is prior to 3000 BC. If it dried in 1900 BC, even then the Rig Veda is the 3rd millennium BC. So we have a lot of nice correlation. Now, as regards the script, I worked personally on this script for many, many years, the 80s and 90s, and I wrote up many research papers which were published in an American journal called Cryptologia, and in also Mankind Quarterly, again from the US, and Indian Journal of History of Science on an overview of Indian writing. And what my analysis showed, and what I did was this: I said, okay, let's look at it as somebody with a clean slate, and you look at the 10 most commonly occurring Harappan script, or I also call it Saraswati script texts, and rank order them. Then you also rank order the 10 most commonly occurring Brahmi script texts, and Brahmi script text would be the same as Sanskrit text, and we know what the frequencies of the various letters of Sanskrit is. And what we find that there is a very close correlation in the shapes of the Saraswati or Harappan texts letters and the Brahmi letters. So without even going into decipherment, one would then be very reasonable in saying that Brahmi is derived from Saraswati. Now, some other interesting things have happened in recent years. In Sri Lanka, Brahmi records have been found, which are 150 years prior to Ashoka's time, because one of the popular Western theories is that writing came to India only with Ashoka and it came from the West. But these records in Sri Lanka go back to 450 BC. And then recently in Haryana, they discovered a large slab.
Chariot.
Sorry?
Chariot, is that, you're talking about the chariot?
A large slab with a unicorn. You know, the unicorn is a very commonly occurring image in the Harappan records. So there is a unicorn, but there are also Brahmi letters. And according to archaeologists, this is probably 800 BC. And therefore, if indeed it's true, this fills in that gap that some people said existed between the Saraswati script era and the Brahmi script era. So now the question as to why hasn't the old Harappan or Saraswati records been deciphered is because these records are very brief. They're only 5 or 7 letters long, mostly, and they were probably symbols attached to shipments, or they were amulets and so on. And if we had only such records, even from our modern times, we wouldn't be able to make much sense of what that language might be. Now, the other important point is that the unicorn, which is so common motif in these ancient records is described in the Mahabharata and the Puranas as Ekashringa, and is a representation of Vishnu. And therefore, we also find a deeper thematic connection between the Saraswati era and the later historical and the Puranic era.
Now, I have two questions, sir. First one is a simple one. Do you think that the unicorn ever existed on Earth?
No, I don't think so. This was a representation.
Okay.
In fact, in the Puranas, there is this story of Ekashringa, Vishnu's Ekashringa, who holds the earth on its shringa. It's one horn. So this is clearly a symbolic representation. And as we know, Hinduism or the Vedic way is replete with symbols of so many different kinds. And all these symbols that were used in the Saraswati era also conform to this structure of the Vedic civilization.
Now, I want to just refer back to the dating of these events, such as the Ramayana and Mahabharata, and I have done a little bit of putting together of data. Now, if you read D.K. Hari and his wife Hema, they have dated the Ram Setu as having been constructed in 5076 BCE, and that takes and also they predict that Rama was born in 5110 BCE, and they say that this can be cross-verified in two ways. One is by listening to Valmiki's descriptions of all the nakshatras in the universe at the time of birth of Rama. There is a constellation software that you can put in these values, and it gives you the time at when this happened, because this unique combination hasn't repeated itself. The other thing they say is that if the bridge was built, and then now we know that the level of the ocean has been rising, and there is a certain fixed amount that it rises every year. Now, if you think that this bridge was at least a meter above the water at that time, and you work backwards to what it is today and try to see the difference in terms of number of years elapsed, both of these match, and that comes to 5076 BCE. Let's just take that as a data point. Now, in Mahabharata, if you kind of drill down to the details, you will find that the Rama's Vansha, right, Raghuvamsha, after Rama, the kingdom kind of split into many parts. For instance, they say that Lahore and Kasur, both Lahore, today modern day Lahore and Kasur, both of these are in Pakistan. These were the kingdoms that were named after the two sons, Lav and Kush. And that there was the Kaushala kingdom, which is supposed to have existed even during the time of Mahabharata. And if you read the Puranas, and I could be wrong about this, but please feel free to correct me, that the descendant of that Rama family actually fought on the side of Kauravas. So this is one data point that we're saying that, I don't remember how many generations before this happened, but there's another date that people say for Mahabharata to have happened, which is 3300 BCE. Now, there is another story that is frequently talked about in Gujarat especially, is one of the names given to Lord Krishna is Ranchhod Das. That means the one who ran away from battle. And this goes back to his battles with Jarasandha. Jarasanda's two daughters were married to Kans, and when Krishna killed Kans, Jarasandha swore revenge. He said that I'm going to kill you. And he had a very powerful army. 16 times he lay siege to Mathura, which is where Krishna was, the Krishna's kingdom was, and 16 times he could stall it. The 17th time, Jarasandha came with a much bigger army, and Krishna felt that he could not defend the kingdom. So in the dark of the night, it is rumored that the Yadu Vamsh went from Mathura all the way, sailed down to Dwarka, because then we see that Krishna's kingdom is in Dwarka. So this journey in the night could have been only possible if there was a river, and that is surmised to be the Saraswati River. Have you read about this, Professor Kak?
Well, there are many different ways of looking at mythological stories or epics, the information in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. The problem that such reconstructions have is that you also have other accounts in the Puranas themselves. For example, the Puranas speak of the Mahabharata battle which took place 1050 BCE or 1500 BCE or 1950 BCE, based on how you read it. Because when Parjita collated the Puranas about 100 years ago, there are scribal errors, and therefore there is some judgment required, and that's why you come up with different figures. And then you also have the Kali Yuga tradition, according to which the battle took place on 3137 BCE, and 35 years later, Lord Krishna passed away, which is why the Kali Yuga begins in 3102 BCE. But then Varaha Mihir has a different time, which is about 2500 BC. So there are all kinds of issues with becoming definitive with these dates, because when you speak of these nakshatras, once again, you have to exercise judgment and decide, does it exactly mean what we are taking it to be? And it's because of how this judgment is exercised that people have come up with figures which are very far different from each other, even though they are using the same astronomy software. So to me, it appears, rather than get bogged down into these details, I'm not saying that people should not be doing this research or should not be doing such reconstructions, but rather than take them to be literal truth, I think what's more important at this point is to lay down firm foundations of the broad contours of this ancient history, which goes prior to the historical period, let's say the Nandas and so on, which everybody accepts, and then see how it can be connected to the archaeological record. So I think a lot needs to be done, and I'm glad that people like scholars like the Haris and many others are working at it from different directions, because it's only when you do further research that people are able to find out what would have been the limitations of how they looked at it and how they need to revisit their arguments, that we would be able to move forward.
Thank you, Subhaji. And also for viewers, Bharat Kalyan is a website of Dr. Kalyana Sundaram, where he has been he regularly posts deciphering of various symbols and so on. And that's for those of you who are interested in knowing about it. Also, DK Hari and Hema Hari's site is Bharat Gyan. And they have an excellent video on YouTube on the Ram Setu. I urge you all to see it. That's where my dating thing comes. So far, we know that these are all itihasas, that is, that it happened. Now, the only question is, the dates around it. I mean, I can also tell you some of the confusing things that come across to me. For example, Subhashi, I don't know if you've been to Chennai. Have you been to Chennai?
I have been once, briefly.
Oh, okay. So there is this suburb called Tiruvanmiyur. Tiruvanmiyur, actually the real correct word is Tiruvalmikiyur. Evidently, this is a Shiva temple that was constructed around the time that Valmiki had come visiting, and it's either before he wrote Ramayana or after he wrote it. Now, this temple itself dates back to about 2000 years. So if you look at that, then did Valmiki live around 0 BC, or was it, he's supposed to have lived and during the time of Lava and Kush, I think. I'm not so sure. So I mean, he was more or less a contemporary of Rama. So I'm just adding a little bit more confusion to this dating. We don't know, but certainly that temple is in excellent shape. It has been encroached upon, but the temple, if you get a chance to go to Chennai, I urge you to visit this temple because this is one of the oldest living temples. It's in excellent shape, very, very well done, and arguably the oldest temple in southern India. I could be wrong about that. So please continue.
Well, just a brief point on temples. According to archaeologists, the earliest big monumental temples in India are only about, let's say, 300 CE or so, or maybe let's say 0 CE, only 2000 years old. And some of these historians of art speak of murtis which came in only around that time, or certainly they're described in Varahamihir. But there is a lot of confusion even amongst scholars, because when you read Panini's Ashtadhyayi, which is 400 or 500 BCE, he does speak of Utsav Murtis. So that takes it back, even though, you know, archaeologists or scholars of art may not be aware of it because they often don't know the text. And then if you go even further back and go to Shatapatha Brahmana or Yajurveda, and you speak of, and you read about the description of the Agni Chayan altar, which was the big royal ritual that was done, where these 1000 bricks were piled in 5 layers. In the middle brick, hollow brick of the top layer was placed a golden Purusha. Therefore, murtis were used in the Agni Chayan ritual, which is certainly older than 1000 BC, 1500 BC, or 2500 BC. So there's a lot of stuff that sadly scholars who are very specialized in their narrow fields do not know about the broader context of the Vedic civilization. And that's where these conversations could be very valuable, because the moment somebody gets alerted to this fact, they can go back to their own library and look up Shatapatha Brahmana and find out that indeed a golden Purush was used, and therefore what they had read in the history of art textbooks was wrong.
Wow, interesting stuff. And viewers, stay tuned. I'm going to go and get some more interviews of experts on this field. Subhash ji will be back with more conversations on the Saraswati civilization. I can tell you this is going to be something very, very interesting, because it's the most important thing a civilization needs to have, that is to know where they came from, their real history. Thank you very much for your time, Subhash ji.
Thank you, Shri Iyer ji. Namaskar.
Namaskar.